Hey, all, welcome back to a Monday, March 17th, 2025 edition here on the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got an awesome show for you guys here on a Monday. It's a pod divided for the Vols versus the Dogs, as we do at this time each and every week here on the Chase Thomas podcast, a Tennessee Vols daily podcast. We talk about Georgia and Tennessee's best 2025 home games on their schedule here in college football. Matt's College Football Minute, a weekly staple here on the program as well, along with the toughest Big Ten schedule in 2025 goes to who? And then CFB, who the top 25 head coaches is, a little preview of what we're going to do on next week's show, and then talking about Bruce Feldman of the Athletics top 25 coaching rankings and where we agree and disagree with his list. So jam-packed show for you guys here today on the program. Don't forget, folks, if you are a first-time watcher of the Chase Thomas podcast here on YouTube, please make sure, if you like what you hear today, hit that subscribe button and comment below and let us know what you think of the show and all that good stuff. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. So if you could hit a thumbs up on this video, comment, and subscribe, and share it out to a friend, family member, coworker, whoever who is a Vol fan who you think might like this show and like listening to it as well, please send it their way. So we're growing a little bit more each and every day, over 2,300 subs here now. So if you could subscribe if you're not already, that would be great as we grow a little bit more each and every day here on this daily Tennessee Vols sports podcast. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Tequila, Georgia, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni and host of the Georgia Voice of College Football. He's growing his hair out. I don't know if it's because the dogs are in the dance for the first time in a decade, but Matt Green is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Oh yeah, how's it going, man? I appreciate you noticing. This isn't nothing. This isn't not really even trying hard. This is like a couple days without shaving. I can grow a little something. No, I can't really grow a beard. This is about all I gets. But no, I am overdue for a haircut. Gotta get my haircut this week. I'm a little scraggly. Look like I'm in college or something. Young college kid growing it out. Now I gotta get more clean cut.
I don't know. As two guys who went to college together, I got to tell you, now, this is going to date us, man. It's been we're nearing 9 years. North Georgia was we're going towards 9 years. You look basically the same. There's not a lot of change here, Matt Green. I don't know if other people, and we can circle back here to Tori and other people. Maybe your mom, big fan of the program, ask her if she's noticed a change. But I'm telling you, I think you're aging. You're doing the Paul Rudd thing here, Matt Green. You're not really changing the look as the years go on.
I'm not nearly in Paul Rudd's lane. What that is like 50 something. Still looks the same as he did in Clueless, basically. No, I definitely got some more grays coming in there, but I appreciate it. I appreciate the compliment.
Hey, look, man, I have a lot less hair since college. I can go ahead and say.
I wasn't gonna say anything,
but hey. It's all right. It's all right. We moisturize and keep it moving, Matt Green. We do what we can
there
do.
It is.
Well, sir, it's been a busy weekend, Tennessee here, on a pod divided for Vols and the Dogs on this night show. But we also have a bunch of college football stuff we're going to dive into. But I mean, Tennessee baseball going up against Tennessee basketball weekend. Tennessee baseball staying undefeated. They're 20-0. Lone undefeated team. They'll be number one in every single poll tomorrow.
Can't be talking baseball over here. Get out of here.
Hold on. Just because the Dogs are not just not in the same stratosphere as to what the Vols are doing here over the last 5 years, doesn't mean that we aren't going to talk about it just for a second because Tennessee swept a good top 10 Florida team that beat the Florida State Seminoles on Tuesday night, who was the second last undefeated team here in college baseball. And it was a big time weekend matchup here for the Vols and the Gators. We couldn't escape them because the Vols faced the Florida Gators in the SEC tournament championship, and we're not able to finish it out in Nashville against the Gators. There'll be a 2 seed, Florida, the final 1 seed here. But I mean, it was just a lot of content. I've watched a lot of Tennessee athletics this weekend, Matt Green, because there was just a lot of, like, this is the time of year where there's just a lot of overlap, and that's just the nature of the beast. And yeah, I mean, like Friday, I think Tennessee played Friday afternoon, and then Friday night we had 2 first-round picks going at it in the Liams, and Liam Doyle versus Liam Peterson inside LNS. So I don't know, man. It was just, I feel like I've done a lot of work this weekend. I've had a lot to watch.
I think you're burying the lead a little bit there, sir. This was Chase Thomas's worst nightmare this weekend. Tennessee going all the way to the SEC championship, had to play all these games. Are you worried, sir?
I mean, time will tell. Like I talked about it on other shows this week. I have not held back in terms of how I see it, but I don't think it's Tennessee's fault. I think Tennessee is in a situation where they have an 8-man rotation. They are basically Rick Barnes is like the Tom Thibodeau of college basketball, where it's just defense first, and he plays his 7 to 8 guys that he trusts, high floor, wins a lot of games. Rick Barnes is a very good college basketball coach. However, Tennessee is uniquely, I think, worse position to do what they did this weekend against any other team, because they are number 1 in defense in KenPom this year. And when you are number 1 in defense, you exert a lot of energy. Like, defense takes a lot of energy and focus and discipline, and it's just hard on the body to be a really good defensive team. And they played 3 games in 3 days and didn't even win the SEC title. But I also don't think they were going to get the final 1 seed, even if they did beat Florida. Because I think there is a lot of people who are like, oh, it's up in the air, we'll see. And I will say, there are reasons that certain people might say publicly that, like, oh yeah, there's not a decision. We'll, like, once it's all over, that's when we'll make the final call. It's like, all right, well, I mean, you didn't do that with Texas A&M a couple of years ago. You didn't do that with Tennessee when they won it in 2022. So I think they were kind of dealt a bad hand, because the way the schedule works is the SEC has to change this anyway, which is they need to move the championship game to Saturday, like everybody else. Like, that Sunday afternoon slot is just bad for the conference and for the teams that make it to that final day.
There's a good bit of them on Sunday still, though. I feel like there's still a good bit of conference championships on Sunday, like Michigan. Who was it? Michigan, Wisconsin was today.
Right, but I'm saying if you get it on Saturday, because you're finishing up right before the brackets, like a lot of stuff. It's you want to have like full 24 hours for them to like really think about it and see what the final result is, and just what you want it to finish as early before the bracket is kind of set as possible. So I would move it to Saturday as in terms of when the SEC tournament wraps up. But the broader point is that, like, you can't, like, these guys are going to go hard. These guys are going to try and win the turtle. Like, they're competitors. So it's not like you can just be like, oh, we'll just tank on Friday against Texas and get out of here. So they're kind of at a disadvantage where they only know going 100 miles an hour, as they should. And I was worried that this could happen, because I still think Florida is the best. Like, Florida and Auburn, I think, are better teams than Tennessee. I think Tennessee's better than Alabama. And they ended up getting a higher seed than Alabama in this bracket. But I just think they were dealt a bad hand, and I think Tennessee is uniquely positioned to be more hurt by this long weekend of games because of how they in particular play basketball and how thin of a roster it is, partly because of the injury to JBSL before the year and Cam Carr leaving in the middle of the year, that you're just down. Like, you have a shortened rotation, you're a defense first team, and you're really good. So you're going to win some games and you're going to go far. It doesn't guarantee you winning the whole tournament. But, I mean, it was just tough. And they fought hard at the end. And they just kind of ran out of gas. Certain guys fouled out. And it was a pretty poorly officiated ball game, I'll say. But now you play on Thursday. Now you're in Lexington at Rep Arena here against Wofford. And we'll see how they play on Thursday. But, like, I don't know. I think the bracket's okay for them. We'll see if they get Kentucky, who they got swept by this year. If Kentucky takes care of business, Tennessee and Kentucky will meet in the Sweet 16. I don't know. It's
Are
a
you sure
huge
about
wait and
that?
see for me.
I thought Kentucky. Is that the same bracket as Georgia?
Yes, you're in our bracket.
Oh, so Kentucky, Georgia, and Tennessee are all in that bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, when you have 14 teams make the dance, there's some overlap. There's a lot
Yeah.
of teams. Like it's wild. 14
Yeah,
to 16.
I don't think it I don't think it's really gonna. Teams have always been playing conference championships on Saturday, Sunday, and then they're ready to play again on Thursday, Friday. Like this is how these guys are always. This is how they're wired. Like I don't think it's too much because I don't think you can't convince me that if this team didn't beat Auburn and Florida, two teams that the committee has as 1 seeds in the final week of the season, beat Auburn and Florida, I feel like they would have gotten a 1 seed. So I feel like they were playing for something.
I mean, that's not what the reporting was today. It was disputed. Like some insiders were saying it's up for grabs based on who wins. Some were saying it's still done. It's just Florida's got that final 1 seed because Florida won at Alabama and they won at Auburn in the regular season. It's just like they were slightly better. And also, like the weird part is like Tennessee and Florida split the 2 games where Tennessee beat down Florida when they came here and Florida blew out Tennessee for their first loss back in Gainesville, which feels like forever ago. So, I mean, we'll never know for sure what would have happened if Tennessee had won that game, if they would have gotten that final 1 seed. But I still think where they ultimately landed is fine. I care less about the 1-2 seed now. I care more about the wear and tear that you just did of 3 games in 3 days and now having to do a quick turnaround to play where the actual tournament that matters. It kind of goes back to our conference tournament, right? And our conference title games in football, where it's like, yeah, why are we punishing the good teams for these big time battles here when we've made the sport all about the playoff, the CFP, and then you have Georgia and Texas, your 2 big dogs, face off in this game that doesn't really mean anything before the thing that does mean something, so that they can bang each other up and knock some guys around and have them less than 100% going into the actual tournament that matters. So I don't know.
You saw the celebration on the field when Trevor Etienne scored that touchdown.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
the players will 100% they care.
Still matters,
but the adults have to step in and be like,
Yeah.
this isn't good. Like it's the NBA. That's like why load management started. The players would have never started load management, right? Greg Popovich and the Spurs started it. It's like it has to start from
I mean,
the
I don't know.
adults
The
in the
players, the players are the ones that are being judged. Like their legacies are being judged by what they do in the playoffs. So they're like, yeah, I mean, let me pace myself so that I'm playing my best ball in the playoffs. You know, it could be a both way. Like it feels like maybe it's just teams protecting their assets, you know, but it feels like players are just like, oh no, you know, I felt a little something. I'm gonna sit out for 2 or 3 games and then be healthy. I don't know. It's hard to say where the load management comes from, but
I think it's mostly team trainers and doctors. I think it's just like I think it's less players. I think players want to play. I think players want to play and they want to compete. And I think now, and that's the other thing too, is like when you talk about, oh, there was no load management back in our day. It's like the amount of possessions is drastically different. Like the game is so much faster. It's way harder on your body to defend. Like Joel Embiid's guarding 1 through 5. Like bigs in the 90s were not guarding point guards. Now you switch everything. It's harder on your body. It's harder on your knees. You're playing more possessions. I think it's just a harder game. So it's just not the same world of 25, and we just know so much more in sports science that it's like, hey, guess what? There are 0 NBA teams that are signing up for 3 games in 3 days. Like back-to-backs are already going away, and those are already been highly disputed. Back-to-backs, 2 games in 2 days.
Yeah, I just like I feel like we're in like this era of saying that things don't matter. Like, oh, these games don't matter. The pointless bowl season, none of those games matter. You know, it's like we're just constantly doing things to try to make more of the games matter, quote unquote. But it's like these things matter. Like the SEC tournament, like that was one of the highlights of the college basketball season. Like there were some amazing games in that tournament. It's been the best conference all year long. Like it's hard to say it's like the conference tournament didn't matter. Like I think a couple teams played their way in, like Oklahoma and Texas probably played their way into the tournament as well. So like, I don't know. I think maybe Florida gets a 1 seed without winning the tournament, but I think it still matters. And it's like just the entertainment value. Like that's the best conference in college basketball. And they just played a hell of the consumers got a hell of a 3-4 days of SEC basketball.
I mean, I don't disagree. Like, I enjoyed watching Tennessee beat Auburn. I think every Tennessee fan enjoyed the weekend by and large up until that final result. It's just now the reality has come due, that you played 3 games in 3 days without a title, and now you got to go turn around and play on Thursday. Like, it's just like, we'll see I don't know how
March
Tennessee's going
Madness,
to respond.
baby.
We'll see. I'm excited. Like, I have no idea what Tennessee's going to do.
And you buried the other lead, which is also the Dogs back in the dance for the first time in a decade.
I opened
That's
the
big
show.
story.
I opened the show with this, saying that it's the
Did
first
you?
time in 10 years the Dogs have gone dancing.
No,
like,
you were
I
saying a lot
literally
of
opened the
Tennessee
show
stuff.
this way.
I forgot. All right. But yeah, it's hate seeing Georgia play Gonzaga because I feel like Gonzaga's is America's team. It's like everyone loves Gonzaga. Gonzaga's been America's team for like decades. Everyone loves
people. I don't think people loved Adam Morrison. I loved Adam Morrison. I don't think people have
Gonzaga
liked.
was definitely America's team. They're just
Nobody likes the mid-majors.
Who dislikes Gonzaga? That's the point. Who dislikes them? There's not.
I think a lot of the blue blood fans. Like, I don't think there's a lot of Kentucky fans who respect Gonzaga. I don't think a lot of UNC fans respect Gonzaga.
Everyone respects Gonzaga, man. They've made like 10 straight Sweet 16s, made a couple Final Fours, a couple championship games. Like, no, Gonzaga's got respect. Like,
I respect Gonzaga. I think they're more of a villain to the holier than thou, the blue blood favorite teams, where it's like, oh, Gonzaga, they don't play anybody in the West Coast Conference all season long and stack up wins when they're not playing St. Mary's, and they go to the dance and they never won a title because they've still never won a title. Like, all championship games twice, I think, in the last 15 years, still no title. But I don't know. The Gonzaga I've always liked and respected, but I don't know. I think it's more.
I don't think that same hostility exists like with college basketball and college football. Like, I think people other fans hated Boise State because it's like,
wait, hated Boise State now or hated Boise State when they were doing the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma?
Well, the Fiesta Bowl versus Oklahoma was great. Like, everyone loved that.
That's what I'm saying. I think people love them, and I think people loved Hawaii.
When they started becoming like the Kellen Moore era, where they're like top 5 and everything, I think there's a little bit of an eye roll. Like, come on, we're voting them top 5.
They beat Georgia in the opener.
Yeah, Georgia wasn't good that year. Like, it's not like Georgia was some powerhouse. Like, they were better than Georgia that year, but it's like, I think there's a little bit of, they don't play anybody. Like, that was their win, was beating like 20th ranked Georgia in 2011. It's like, yeah, that's a good win, but
I think the playoff hurts these now.
Contender.
Like, the way people talk about Arizona State, Boise State, like, I think it's like, it's not their fault that they're getting the first round bye. Like, we hate the teams that get these first round byes.
That's a different discussion. That's a different discussion. But I just mean, like, the Kellen Moore era, like, there's a lot of similarities with Boise State and Gonzaga. But I think college football fans, just, if you're not playing a legit schedule, you're going to get hated on. Like, that's why I hated on the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart era. It's like, yeah, this team's great. They've played like 2 ranked teams like all year. It's like, it's not the same. And so college football fans are like that. I don't know that college basketball fans care that much, because it's like, you get to the tournament and you prove how legit you are. And year in, year out, Gonzaga proves to be pretty legit in the tournament.
I don't know. That's a good question. I think baseball is definitely more football mindset, where like the SEC just running college baseball because they won the last 4 national titles. That like, oh, if you're not in the SEC, it's like, if you're not first, you're last when it comes to college baseball in the SEC. Where I think there's a huge lack of respect, especially with Texas and Oklahoma entering the fray this year. It's like, I don't know. I feel like that is a growing sentiment in college baseball. But this is ostensibly, Matt Green, a college football show highlighted by a pod divided with on the balls and the dogs here, sir. So let's dive into our dog bites and balls minutes here this week on the program. Matt Green, we each have the same question, but I'll pitch it to you first. Which home game, Matt Green, are you currently most excited for in 2025 for the Dogs?
So it really comes down to, it's really only 2 options here. It's either Alabama or it's Texas. Like, the Ole Miss game, that's going to be big. Ole Miss came to Georgia, was it 2023 last time? They may have played another one like kind of recently too. Alabama hasn't gone to Athens since 2015. Likely the game that really cemented Mark Richt getting fired. It's like, okay, we're not playing the same. We're not in the same realm as Alabama right now. Let's start to get our things in order. I think just the fact that it's the first time that Kirby Smart has played Alabama in Athens since becoming the head coach, like that's a great storyline. But I mean, just with what Texas and Georgia's kind of already become in the SEC, and like faced twice the first year Texas was in it, and now it's going to be, the SEC finale in 2025. It's hard to pick against between those two, but off the top of my head, it's like, I don't know, the Texas thing, they're still new to the SEC and everything. So I don't circle Texas like the traditional SEC rivalries. You know what I mean? So just for that reason, I want to see Alabama play between the hedges. So I think Alabama, and the fact that it's as early as it is, it's just going to set the tone for Georgia's season, I think, really. Because you could be coming off a potential loss in Neyland Stadium, week 3. So it's the first big home game of the season. So I think it's just in a massive spot of the season. So I think you'd have to pick Alabama.
It's interesting. I didn't think you'd go Bama there. I thought you would have gone Texas. Like, Texas just feels like it's kind of to me. What's interesting is how quickly it feels like the biggest rivalry for Georgia in the SEC has gone from Alabama to Texas. And it didn't really happen with all these meaningful games. Like, you had so many big time moments between Bama and Georgia over the last decade, and especially they're part of the story, obviously, with the national championship game and things like that. Like, there's just so, like, the heartbreak, the Tua second half, like, there's so many different levels to the Bama Georgia rivalry of the last 10 years that with Saban gone and Alabama just having kind of a forgettable year last year, even though Bama Georgia was another classic in Tuscaloosa last year, that it's still, to me, we don't look at Alabama the same. Like, how quickly that changed, where I think Alabama fans, obviously, and I'm sure Alabama fans are not going to like that I'm saying this, but like, it's still a TBD on Kalen DeBoer. Like, yeah, it's good Ryan Grubb's back, but they clearly took a step back, and it's just not the same aura, which, of course, it's impossible to maintain that same aura without Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time. But it's just like we all kind of accepted that Texas and Georgia are the two premier programs in the conference right now in college football. And they're like think about the battle between Justice Terry this past cycle between Texas and Georgia. That 4 years ago is a Georgia-Alabama battle, not a Texas-Georgia battle, but it just feels like Texas and Georgia are just mirroring one another in terms of how they're stacking talent, where they're at in their program, feeling like they can win the national title every year right now. Doesn't mean they will. It just means that they have the capability of doing so. And Alabama just feels like it's not. Like, if you beat Alabama, you're like, cool. Like, all right, we beat Ty Simpson and company. Like, this is a team that went 9-4 last year. They might go 9-4 again this year. We beat Texas at home. That feels like, oh, we beat a team that, with Arch Manning and the team that is the preseason favorite to win the national championship this year. I don't know. It feels like there's not the history of beating Alabama and what that rivalry means. But to me, I just feel like Texas is now the measuring stick for Georgia, and it felt like it was Bama for the last 10 years.
No, I think that's fair. And I think that's what like, if you're doing projections, like, yeah, Georgia Texas is going to become that biggest rival, most likely, or at least appears to be on that track. But right now, it's still Alabama because, like you're saying, I mean, the jury is still out on Kalen DeBoer. And if he starts his career 2-0, it's one thing if Kirby's whatever he was like 1-6 versus Saban or something like that, and then for DeBoer to take over, who appears to be not as good, and him to beat Kirby 2-0, like, that would just be massive, just from a narrative perspective. But I also think Kalen DeBoer, like you said, like, Alabama doesn't have that aura. Like, that's where I feel like Kalen DeBoer is kind of being unfairly judged, because like, that had already worn off under Saban. Like, the last like 3 years of Saban, they didn't have that same aura. So it's like Kalen DeBoer is coming in and being compared to 2015 Bama, and it's like they already weren't 2015 Bama in 2022 and 2023. You know, like, they won the SEC in 23, but I mean, it was just unlike any Saban SEC championship team we've seen. You know, they just kind of found ways to win games. They didn't seem that good. Found a way to beat Georgia. Almost beat Michigan, but lost in the playoff. First time Bama's ever lost under Saban in in the first round of the college football playoff. Oh, except for Ohio State. I guess that was the other one, 2014. So I think DeBoer gets a little unfairly judged for that reason, but I think just what that would do to the narrative if it doesn't really matter who's the coach, Alabama owns Kirby, like you want to put that away.
And I just think it's also not enough time has passed, right? Like it's just the Bama stuff's still fresh, and the game last year was, I think, more memorable, right? Like obviously the trash in the field with Texas is the most memorable part of Texas Georgia, is that fans influenced a call getting picked up and changed, which is one of the crazier things we've ever seen in the sport. So that's what we remember that game for. But Bama Georgia was the game of the year for those two sides. Was just Bama starting off 28-0 and Georgia fighting all the way back and thinking they're about to win, and Ryan Williams out of nowhere. Like it's just that game had everything. Like, and I wonder, the hope is that's what you have again this year in Athens. So to your point, it's not been a fair road for Kalen DeBoer to this point, but it's also like, what did you think was going to happen? You took the Alabama job. Like you're following the best coach of all time. Like, it's unfair. Like it's going to be unfair, and it's going to be unfair for the next guy after. It was unfair for Nick Saban. Like people forget Bama was wandering the wilderness prior to Saban for over a decade. Like you look at the gap between Alabama national titles from when Saban took over and won his first, and going back to the last national championship before that, it's a huge gap. So I just think
Shula in there. Mike Price didn't even ever coach a game in there. Was it Francione? Was he one of the ones in there, like late 90s or something?
If you go through Bama coaches, like let me see here. I don't want to get them all wrong because I'm trying to think when Bill Curry. Hold on a second. Yeah, 87 to 89 was Bill Curry. Mike DeBose, that's the name I was trying to remember. But Francione was there 01 to 02. But yeah, Mike DeBose is the one I was thinking of. So
who's late 90s?
Yeah.
What years is Mike DeBose?
97 to 2000.
Okay. Because that's the Sean Alexander. I think they won the SEC 1 year. Okay.
And then Gene Stallings before him and Curry before him. So that's what I'm saying. Like you just kind of go back through and it's like, okay, Saban he set the bar pretty high and did things pretty well, I would say, in Tuscaloosa for a long time. So it's going to be, but I also think the difference now is that the days of Saban's run, Kirby's run at the tail end are impossible now because of the expansion of the college football playoff, because of the portal, because of NIL, because of bloated conferences. It's just different. And I don't think you're going to see those kind of runs that we grew up on in college football. Like we're going to see some changes. That remains
to be seen, sir, because it might be easier to make a run like that because you don't have to be perfect in the regular season. Like maybe you just have to be like Ohio State and you're the most talented team. You lose 2 games, but we turn on when we need to. And those few teams at the top are the ones that are capable of doing that. And maybe we do. Maybe the next 10 years, we see 3 teams win national championships or something, and it's Ohio State and it's Georgia and it's Texas or something like that. And maybe it's just kind of, it changes who the superpowers are, but college football has been a sport of superpowers for the majority of its history. So I don't know. I think Texas, like obviously there were 2 good games, but at this point, Texas is just a new team that joined the conference that hasn't beaten Georgia, so it's not like it's going to be like a top 5 matchup. If Georgia's doing what they're supposed to do, Texas is most likely going to come into Athens as a top 5 team. It's going to be a massive game, but to this point, I think Alabama's just caused Georgia fans so much more frustration that's always going to be circled like more than any other game.
And you assume they travel better for this game, right? Like it's right there. Like you're gonna have a lot more Alabama folks in there, and it's just gonna have than Texas. Texas folks are probably still like, I don't know. They had to travel a bunch. Texas folks had to spend a bunch of money to follow their football team around.
Specifically to Atlanta too. They're probably tired of going through Hartsfield.
Yeah, take a break. Like they might sit that one out. Like
but I'm sure they're going to travel as well as anybody. Like that's a massive like bucket list type of game. Joining the SEC, like traveling to Georgia. Like I'm sure Georgia fans treated the Texas game a year ago, so they're going to show out like any other fan base.
Yeah, I was just saying in terms of comparison about Bama only. I just feel like Bama's going to have a stronger appearance.
No, it's definitely possible.
but we'll see.
Maybe they'll wear the black jerseys. I don't know. We'll see.
That would be good. I would do it.
No.
That would be fun.
Exercise the demons. Is that the only way to wear the black versus Alabama? Is that the only way to get them back?
It's possible. Never say never, Matt Green.
No, that's not happening. I'm not going to get my hopes up for that.
Never...
I'm not even sure I want that as much as I want black jerseys.
I mean, that would be good. Bring them back. What do you mean? They look
because
good.
Then if they lost to Alabama again, do you realize how
it's not the black
terrible that
jersey's fault, Matt Green? Let me go ahead and.
I know it's not the jersey's fault, but we're talking to the crazies out there that think the jerseys are the reason they won, and we need to stop all this. What do they call them? Fake juice, I think is what they called them on the message boards. It's like we saw what Saban's Bama program was, saw what Mark Richt's Georgia program was. Like that's the reason for the result and nothing else.
Yeah. Matt Green, on the flip side here, Tennessee side of things, I went back and forth in this question because I think there's a strong argument for Georgia. And I think if you polled Tennessee fans, which home game are they most amped for? It's probably Georgia. And part of it, I think, is you get them, like, it's circumstantial, right? Where I think getting Georgia in week 3 is just new. We haven't had this in a long time here. Georgia is breaking in a new quarterback. They're breaking in new starters at wide receiver, on the offensive line. We'll see what they look like at edge. There's not that Jalen Carter inside, even though Elijah Griffin just got compared to the next Jalen Carter.
He did. Warren Brinson called him the next Jalen Carter.
And he very well might be, but Jalen Carter was not the Jalen Carter we saw year 1 and year 3 at Georgia. Still took some time.
As a true freshman, that dude was a baller.
I'm just saying. I recall Jalen Carter,
Devontae Wyatt, and Trayvon Walker.
He was wrecking Tennessee his 3rd year, and that's when he became like a top. Like I don't know. I just like doesn't mean he's not gonna be. It's just that's putting a lot on a.
He was a dude from day one, though. He came into a crowded room, so Elijah Griffin won't have the same guys in front of him. So if he's as good, he'll play a lot more than Jalen Carter did.
Yeah.
But I'm not, like I said before, I'm not putting that on anybody. Like I think he might be the best D lineman that ever plays at Georgia. So I'm not even going to compare anyone to Jalen Carter until I see it.
Yeah. Questions at corner. I think it's fair to say for Georgia going to this. So it just feels like this is the most gettable. And when I say gettable, I'm putting it like in air quotes because Tennessee has not scored in the second half against Georgia the last 2 times. But I will say, if you go back and watch, I've watched Georgia Tennessee probably 3 times since that game happened. Tennessee played Georgia strong, especially in the first half. I think 2024 was the best they played Georgia in the Heupel Kirby era. Here,
what was the halftime score?
What Tennessee had 17, right?
Was it tie? Yeah, was it 17-17 at half?
Yeah, I think that's right. And it was a battle. Like it felt like that game was just. You worried about Tennessee's inability to put a body on Carson Beck. He had a lot of time in the pocket, and you're like, that can't continue if Tennessee's going to pull out a victory here. But we don't have to rehash that game. Ultimately, what I'm saying is I think there are reasons for optimism if you are looking at this game in week 3 and the placement that it's happening, where Tennessee will be at year 3 with Nico. And Heupel has only lost 1 home game in the last 3 years, and it was against Georgia 2 years ago. And I can understand that you're like, I don't want to get my hopes up too much that this is going to be different in year 5. But I do think Tennessee will still have a top 10 to 12 scoring defense again next year. I think Tennessee will be undefeated coming into this game. I think this is a good college game day potential for this game. I think it is going to be, because part of what was different 2 years ago when Georgia last came to Knoxville, there wasn't a lot of juice coming into that game. Like it was a pretty miserable year offensively, and Joe Milton had a rough year, and it was just not. You didn't really think Tennessee had a shot. But going into week 3... They were
still playing for something, right? It was only like a 2-loss team, I want to say, like late in the season, right?
3.
And then, I mean, obviously they broke that touchdown the first play of the game. So there's definitely juice after that.
I mean, it got ugly in a hurry. Like that game got...
I mean, that was definitely... It was like 59 minutes of like domination, basically, after that opening.
I was going to say, like, you're being generous here with how you're viewing this. But remember, the week prior, Mizzou blew out Tennessee 36-7. And that was another miserable game. So it was coming in with low vibes.
Cody Schrader going off.
Yeah. So it was not like the vibes were low going into that game. This game, will be two undefeated teams, and I just think the vibes will be as strong in Tennessee's favor as they've been in this series to this point. Now, vibes don't win games, Matt Green, but I will say Neyland is rocking. Neyland will be amped. The fans will be at full belief mode for this game. I wonder if they check her Neyland for this one, but I think this is going to be the loudest, the most intense Tennessee-Georgia game in a long time, because I think there is real belief. I mean, Nico, we'll see what kind of jump he makes. We'll see. There's a lot of optimism about the offensive line being better than a year ago. I think the receivers are intriguing. You got the two number one players at receiver on the Vols roster who came out of the state of Georgia, who chose Tennessee over the home state, and Mike Matthews and Travis Smith Jr. I think like I said, the defense should be really good. I think it's going to be a competitive, high stakes game that you're getting Georgia at the right time, because I don't think and we've talked about this all summer. It's like, or all offseason, Georgia has real questions on the offense. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how Gunnar Stockton's going to play. We don't know how all these new receivers are going to acclimate. Georgia had a bad offensive line down the stretch last year. How does that look with some new faces? Does it get better? Does it get worse? I think those are all real interesting questions. It doesn't mean it's all going to happen and it's not going to go well for Georgia. It just means that it's out there and that there is reasons to believe that this game will be competitive going into the fourth quarter for the first time in this series. I think that's very much in play based on the circumstances for both teams and just where it falls in the calendar. So if you're a Tennessee fan and you say that the answer is Georgia in terms of what game you're looking forward to, I can understand that. For me, though, I think it's
got to be, before you move on, I think it's got to be Georgia. And also the last time you beat Georgia at home was 2015, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's a grace that Reggie Davis dropped that like 40, 50-yard touchdown. Best game of Reggie Davis's career. But he dropped the one at the end.
Crompton blew him out too in 2009.
Say that again?
Crompton and company blew him out in 2009. I think that was Georgia. Did they return the opening kick for that game too? It's kind of funny we talk about that.
Boykin definitely, I don't know if it was the opening kick, but he definitely returned a kick for a touchdown in that game. The Lane Kiffin year. Yeah, that was a blowout for sure. So are those the only two? Lane Kiffin, and then because the overtime one was 2013 that Georgia ended up winning. 2015, that was with Grayson Lambert, because and Georgia lost. 2011 would have been Georgia won that one too. That I was at the 2011 game. Actually, Isaiah Crowell's freshman year. So so
Tennessee won in 15, 2009, 2007 in Knoxville. And then
2007 was an absolute beatdown too. I think Georgia scored like a touchdown late to make it like 35-14 or something like that. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, I think D'Amico Goodman had like an amazing it was like an amazing play, like one-handed catch. But it was like the tightest plays ever made, but it was like a 35-7 game, so no one really cared.
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know. But I will say, the one I think is going to be most... I mean, do you remember how loud it got and how crazy Oklahoma, Tennessee was with Baker Mayfield coming to town? And that was unbelievable in terms of like just how intense and loud and what that atmosphere was like. It's going to depend on where Oklahoma's at coming into this game. Like, they're a huge boom or bust team this year, obviously. No pun there with boom or bust. But John Mateer, if he's like a Heisman type guy and he has a Cam Ward like impact at Oklahoma, and obviously with the history of Heupel and Oklahoma, now Seth Littrell, the OC that they fired, who's been a teammate and close friend of Heupel for 25 years. He's now an analyst at Tennessee on off. There's just so much overlap between the two programs that if Oklahoma's good coming into Knoxville for that game, I think the atmosphere for that one might be the craziest of the year, because I think fans really are going to go to bat for Heupel. They loved Heupel getting that win in Norman last year. Like, that meant a lot to fans here locally, and I think they're going to back him up big time for that game. And I just think there's going to be a lot of emotion in Tennessee, Oklahoma when they come to town. And if it's a big time matchup because Oklahoma takes care of business, there's a chance that is the number one home game for Tennessee this year, is depending on what Oklahoma does with their side of things, because I think there's potential for all the recipe of a really fun type environment and type game.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It feels like Heupel going to Oklahoma is just a bigger storyline than Oklahoma coming to Tennessee. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little history now here with Oklahoma and Tennessee. But I don't think just because, like we were saying with Georgia, like the where it falls on the schedule and everything, just like what that's gonna do to Tennessee's schedule. If they beat Georgia week 3, it's gonna feel like, okay, we're going undefeated this year. If you're a Tennessee fan, like maybe it's like Alabama in 2022, and it's like, unfortunately, the year you beat Alabama, they weren't the best team out there. And so maybe Georgia is a down year of Georgia, and you beat Georgia, and they turn out to be like a 3-loss team or something. But I think just what it's going to do vibes wise, it's Heupel's first win over Kirby. I think there's nothing that compares to that. Like if Oklahoma turns out to be, one of the best games, that might not be a good thing. You know what I mean? Because Oklahoma, they could be a surprise team. But I mean, they're probably going to be like preseason 10th, 12th or something coming into this conference this year. It's not necessarily, they're not necessarily supposed to be on Tennessee's level coming into 2025.
That's fair. I'm excited for both, but I will say that I agree with you that the answer right now is Georgia. But I mean, they're like, think about this too. Heupel and Luttrell were both fired as offensive coordinators at their alma mater. Luttrell this past offseason at Oklahoma, and Heupel years ago under Stoops. So both have been fired by the place they won a national championship at, and they're coming to Knoxville. Like I could just see,
yeah,
like there's a revenge angle there. So I just think there's a lot there. I'll just say it's going to be.
What about Sam Pittman in Arkansas coming to town? Are they circling that one for the revenge?
I think that's kind of like, did you ever watch Mad Men?
I've watched some of it.
Do you remember the scene with the guy from Superstar? Is his name? I forgot his name. In the show.
The young guy.
Yeah. Where he gets on the elevator with Don, and he says something to him, and Don's like, I don't even think about you at all. Where he said, oh yeah, he says, I feel sorry for you, and he's like, I don't think about you at all. That's how it is with Tennessee, Arkansas, where it's like, oh, big win. They beat. It's like they went to the playoff anyway, and it's just like you're competing for 6 and 7.
Yeah, that would have been like their second loss. I mean, it's their first loss, but like the Georgia one is the number 1 loss, kind of. So like that's the second loss that theoretically should have ruined your season,
but it
didn't really prevent Tennessee from doing anything. But it's still not a great not a great look though, and especially when you think about Heupel's, it kind of adds to Heupel's history of road troubles.
I will lock in Tennessee beats Arkansas at home. Let's just go ahead and lock.
Who are the biggest road games? Do you have the schedule pulled up in front of you? Because I mean, that's where you got to worry about Heupel, especially like if they get off to like a 3-0 start. Maybe they start, feeling themselves a little bit. They beat Georgia, let their guard down with one of these road games, because you got to worry about Heupel's teams going on the road at this point.
I mean, if they beat Georgia, they're in the playoff. Like it's
Alabama, and Florida, those both on the road.
It. Yeah, I mean that's it. Like you get Vanderbilt at home, Oklahoma at home. You have that neutral site against Syracuse to open, but you get Arkansas at home. You got to go to Mississippi State.
Sleeping on Cuse. You're sleeping on Fran Brown and company.
I would be a lot more worrisome if Kyle McCord was back. I think that's more of an intriguing game.
I don't think I realized Kyle McCord wasn't back.
Yeah, he's
not back.
No, he's in the NFL draft, man. He might be QB3.
What?
He took advantage, man. He had to go like he is going to go higher because of how bad this group is. Seems like he might be.
He probably had as good of a year as he's ever going to have.
I was going to say it's hard to top what he just did at Syracuse this past year. I like the odds of him being able to run that back.
Imagine saying that in the same season where a guy had a game where he threw 3 pick sixes in one game. I think he threw 5 picks versus Pittsburgh this year. Yeah, brutal. But hey, go get your money, Kyle McCord.
It's a rare double win though. Kyle McCord left and balled out at Syracuse, and Ohio State lost Kyle McCord and won a national title with Will Howard. So it's like both benefited from the breakup.
There you go.
Matt's Minute that we're going to debut here weekly, a new weekly staple, Matt Green, on a pod divided for the Vols and the Dogs. Sir, what do you have for us this evening?
So this evening, I think I've been as critical as anyone of the college football playoff expansion. No one wants to hear that. It's get off my lawn, all that grinding gears all the time. But I'm hoping. I thought of this while watching Selection Sunday today, the NCAA tournament bracket revealed and everything. I'm hoping that college football can look more like college basketball from a coaching perspective. And I think we've talked about this before. Maybe the playoff will do that. And it's, college basketball coaches are institutions. Like Tom Izzo just made his 27th NCAA tournament, I think. Like he's won one national title, but this guy, he's one of the best coaches in the country. He's there forever. Like even guys that don't seem like they've been there that long, like Bruce Pearl and Kelvin Sampson have both been there for like a decade. They haven't won a championship. Rick Barnes has almost been there for like a decade. He was at Texas for like 17 years, never won anything, never won a national title, I should say. Won a lot of games. But it's like college basketball coaches are just like allowed to just be around for the longest time. And it's like college football, you don't make it 5 years. You don't have a title. We need to get rid of you. Like you look at the SEC right now, there's only 2 head coaches that have been at their current school for more than 5 years. Kirby and Stoops. Right now, Pittman, Drinkowitz, and Kiffin, they were all in their 5th year this past year. And then Sarkisian, Heupel, and Beamer going into year 5 this year. Like there's just so much more turnover in college football. I would like to see at some point, like guys are there for 20, 25 years. And right now, it's like that's just like a coaching pressure thing. Like you haven't won a title, like peace. Like I think most Georgia fans thought like Kirby Smart took over. It's like, oh, this guy's gonna be our coach for like 30 years. Like he's like 40 years old or something when he got the job. Like if he coaches till Nick, like to the same age that Nick Saban did, that would make him the Georgia coach till 2048. There's no way in hell Kirby is gonna last till 2048. Like I'd be shocked if. Not shocked, but I mean, I'd be a little surprised if he's like much past 2030, 2035, like with just all the rules and everything and how like burnt out this guy's got to get at some point. Like he's just all gas, no brakes, So I think some of it's like the rule changes, like some of like uniformity and like some, maybe the NIL actually improves recruiting, like in terms of like these guys, these coaches, work-life balance, like Deion Sanders talking about he doesn't go on in-home visits, and Bill Belichick, I think, doesn't plan to do that either. Maybe it's just like, hey, tell me what the money is, tell me what the dollars and cents is, and we'll figure out how to get the roster we want. So maybe recruiting does start to tamp down a little bit, but with how these coaches are always on the road and everything, I would be shocked if Kirby Smart made it that long for Georgia. So part of this is selfish. I want Kirby to last for 30 years. But yeah, I'm hoping that maybe in the playoff, we can see more guys that are out of school for a decade, for 20 years, and they just have a consistent, good program year in and year out.
I mean, I think it's just TBD on all that, right? Like we'll see what rules are in place. We see, like, let's see where NIL is. Let's see where the sport is. I mean, it looks like another round of conference realignment is on the deck here at the beginning of the 2030s. But then that might be it for a long time. Like that might be the final big chess move and board reshuffling for a long time. And maybe their players are employees in the next 5 years. Maybe there are a lot more guardrails and changes that make head coaching far more appealing long term, like maybe that's what GMs do. Maybe with this expansion of personnel departments at the big time Power 4 schools, that you start to see more taken off the head coach's plate. But I think it would require guys like Kirby to trust other people in terms of roster evaluations, in terms of like bringing in the right guys, where it's like you're not as hands-on anymore, like you're not helicoptering all over the place. So we have people who will
Kirby
do that.
Copter.
Yeah, like it's just, I don't know. These are all what ifs and questions that I don't have the answers to, but I don't know. I think it's still early. I think the doom and gloom of like, oh, they're all out. Because remember, like the thing called basketball, it's like Tony Bennett's out. It's like, oh, look at what's happening. Jim Larinaga, he's gone. Oh, it's like there's still a lot of big time.
Larinaga was really old, yeah.
Right, like Jim Boeheim. Okay, he'd been there a long time.
He's there for like 40 years.
Yeah,
won national championship, but he was just one of the better coaches in the game.
Nick Saban, mid-70s. Like, he had a great run. Like, it's not like Nick Saban walked away here at 55. Like, I think it's just, there's been a lot of hyperbolic statements in terms of like, oh, we're losing so many big time coaches. And remember, that's been the fear mongering since NIL started. What in the portal was that you're going to see so many coaches leave, and there was the scuttlebutt of like, oh, you wouldn't believe who's. It's like at the end of the day, these guys are all competitors. I think Josh Heupel makes $200,000 a week based on his contract. That's a hard thing to walk away from. I think it's kind of like not to make everything about Mad Men. Don Draper, that's what the money is for. Like, this is a stressful job, but you're paid really well. Like, these guys are paid really, really well. So to walk away, I think it's hard. And like Gus Malzahn, most recent one, oh, he's just going to go be an OC. What is Gus's age? He's coached in a national championship. Gus has been a long time coach. Like he's got to be in his 60s, right? I just think it's different for guys like Kirby because they got head coaching jobs when they were a lot younger. Yeah, he turned 60 this year, Gus Malzahn does. So he's finally stepping back from being a head coach to being just a coordinator again at 60. Like, it's just a little bit.
He could have been a head coach for another decade if he wanted to be also.
Chip Kelly has had 2 NFL head coaching jobs. He's been a head coach like him. It's not the craziest thing in the world for him to be like, all right, I'm ready to settle back down. I think it's different for guys like Sean McVay with the Los Angeles Rams, who won early, got the job super young, and it's like, wow, that seems like just like it's hard to see you doing that for 40 years. Because I think it's different when these young guys get the job, and Kirby got the job, a big time job, like you said at Georgia, way younger than Saban got at Alabama. Like, it's completely different timelines here. So no, it's not realistic to expect Kirby to be there till 2048.
Probably younger than he got the Michigan State job,
right? And I think Rick Barnes, like, he has been great at the portal and NIL. He's 70. Like Rick Pitino, 72, and he's thriving at St. John's. They just won the Big East tournament, best team in the Big East this year. He's handled the portal well and everything else. Like, he's doing it. He's in his mid 70s. Like, I just think everything is a case by case basis, and the sky is falling rhetoric doesn't help anybody. And I think it's just not true. Like, Kirby's still here. A lot of the best big time coaches, like we have this great group of young guys rising up the ranks, like Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning, and just you go up and down the list. They're great coaches all around that have not left the sport and don't seem to be trending that way. Like, I think it's Bill Belichick voluntarily just dove into the madness at a place that can't win a national title. Like, Bill Belichick's 72, and Jim
Harbaugh only bounced because he was cheating, so he needed to get out of college.
He won a national championship. Jim Harbaugh is like, I'm going to the NFL because I just wanted. He went out like, you're not gonna be able to top it. Like, it's hard to keep this thing humming to Sandland. If you get an NFL opportunity, make the jump.
But that would have destroyed Harbaugh's legacy if he got all these sanctions.
Well, hold on. We don't have to go into all that. Like, Harbaugh, I think it was a unique, we don't know, but like, Harbaugh still won a national title, and he was there a long time. He was a Stanford coach for a long time. He was San Diego State before. Like, he's done.
He wasn't there for 10 years though.
Who?
Harbaugh.
Which spot?
He was at most at Michigan for 10 years. I would say like 7 or 8 years.
He was at Michigan for 9. It looks like
9 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that felt like a guy had been there for a long time. You know, it's like even before Saban, like there's just, I think more, the second half of my argument is like maybe the burnout thing. And yeah, I'm more worried about specifically Kirby Smart when it comes to that.
I can tell this is where this is all stemming from.
Of course, sir. That's where all my worries come from. But in terms of the expectations and just the championship standards, I think that's the main reason why guys just couldn't last more than like a decade. Like, you have to be really, really, really good to be at a program for more than a decade without winning a title. Like, it literally takes Mark Richt. Like, Mark Richt was like the best coach. Like, every time you'd look at a list of Georgia or Mark Richt, it would be the best program or the best coach that had not won a title. It'd be 5 other teams that had won championships and then Georgia on some list. You know, it's like, so it takes that level of like winning, you know, averaging 10-3 for 15 years to stay somewhere without winning a title. And you don't see many of those guys, like a Kirk Ferentz. Like, that's one of the few I can kind of think of in college football. A guy's been there for like 25 something years. But I would just like to see more. I feel like there's more, especially like now with the portal era. Like, we're not able to claim all the players that play at Georgia, right? Like, you look at NFL, AD Mitchell, he's a Texas guy, you know? So these players aren't even lasting. Maybe the coaches can last a little longer, right? Because these coaches are they're kind of institutions in college. Like they're the ones that there's a lot of roster turnover, and even more so than ever. Maybe the coaches, because the guy goes 5 years and has a couple playoff appearances. It's like, hey, we got a good program here. We'll let him stick it out another 5 years. Maybe that's what the playoff does. And it's teams have a little more realistic expectations. Kurt Signetti, that playoff appearance probably buys him a decade at Indiana if he's not not upgraded.
Indiana's the worst Power 4
years.
FBS program of all time. Like he should have a job as long as he wants it anyway. Like Indiana's a terrible football job historically.
Yeah, and maybe he does, and that's the thing about college basketball is like you have a great year. I know there was it Chris Beard, is that his name? Texas had the great year at Texas Tech and then jumped to Texas. Like obviously those things are still going to happen, but a lot of times it's like if you're capable of going to a Final Four or national title here, you just stay there for 10, 15, 20 years. And maybe
or if you're a G4 school, like, and you don't have expectations, like, I mean, Ohio's coach, Ablin, who just got the Charlotte job. I mean, how long was he at Ohio? Like, he just won consistently. Jason Candle at Toledo, he's been there forever. Matt Campbell, he could be at Iowa State for as long as he wants because their expectations are realistic and rational, where it's like, we're not doing better than Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell's a top 10, 15 coach in the sport. Like, no, like, we'll never win a national title, so why are we pretending like he's gonna, like, you know what I mean? I think it depends on where you're at and what the stakes are year in, year out, because that's why Kirk Ferentz, I mean, across the bridge, like Iowa football fans, no matter what, like how many 10-win seasons they have, I don't think the administration's like, we need a national title, Kirk. Like, where's our natty?
Necessarily, yeah. I think that's why they're in a specific. They're almost, no disrespect to Iowa and Iowa State, but they're almost more like the G4 college basketball programs. They're like, yeah, we're just really good year in and year out, and we like this guy. Like, we don't need to be.
We understand that we don't have the blue chip talent in our state and our surrounding areas to really compete.
In terms of what it does, like Michigan State's one of the teams that's playing in that first four game every year. With Kansas and Duke and everything. It's like they've won one national title in 27 years, so it's like even for the big time programs, it's like you just know what's a really good program. Maybe Josh Heupel has 5 straight years of a college ball playoff appearance, doesn't get past the first round any of those times. It's like, yeah, but we're getting to the playoff every year. We have a good team. We're winning 9-10 games every single year. We're not that upset that he hasn't won a conference title, that he hasn't won a national title yet. Maybe there's just a more tangible, even among the powerhouse programs or the wannabe powerhouse. They're not putting Tennessee as a powerhouse just yet, but they're trying to get back there. But yeah, just those kind of programs that have championship standards. Even they're good enough with like, hey, this guy's putting us in the top 5, top 10. Like we're getting there. Let's give him a few more years.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting to follow. I don't know. I'm very curious. I think my theory, and I want to like keep track of this over the next 5 years. I think I'm curious how many defensive-minded coaches stick long-term versus offensive-minded coaches, because so many of the, like, I think the coaches like Beamer, I think, are in a tough spot, or Sam Pittman, because they're CEO type coaches. So they're one bad OC hire away from like torpedoing the whole thing and just going off the rails.
A guy that maybe wasn't a coordinator, didn't necessarily have his specialty before getting a head coaching job.
Wait, say it again.
You just mean like a guy who wasn't a coordinator? Like,
yes, like those CEO guys. Like, I just feel like they're always year to year of like, man, you're one bad OC hire away because you had a really good year, and then that great OC who kind of, it's the Gene Chizik thing, where it's like Gus Malzahn powered that thing with Cam Newton and company, and then
Gus Malzahn didn't do it. Cam Newton powered that.
Well, what I'm saying, I don't know, Scott Loeffler calling that offense versus Gus Malzahn calling that offense, because you saw Nick Marshall did pretty well as a former defensive back in the Auburn system.
He did pretty well. Cam Newton was the greatest player I've ever seen.
I'm not taking anything from Cam. I love Cam Newton. Like, he was fantastic. What I am saying, though, is Gus Malzahn did make a difference from Scott Loeffler. Like, we saw the difference after Gus Malzahn left. My point, though, is that I do think when you are an offensive-minded coach, you build yourself, or defensive-minded coach, I think works if you can recruit well enough. Like, Georgia, Oregon, those kind of programs right now can lean on having a defensive-minded coach because they recruit. I mean, Nick Saban beforehand, where if you're able to stack defensive talent and maintain elite defenses year over year, like you're in good shape. Like even if the offensives have some James Coley bumps in the way where it's like, all right, we'll address it, but our defense was still top 10 in the country. We're fine. We're still a high floor. But I don't think that's the case for most. I think I think there's a lot more defensive variability for most teams. But I think offensively, if you have one of the best offensive minds, like Lincoln Riley still doesn't have terrible years. Lincoln Riley's still a good offensive mind. Steve Sarkisian's still a good offensive mind. I just think there's a lot more across the sport. If your head coach is an offensive-minded guy, I feel like he's more likely to stick at your program long-term than a defensive-minded guy. But I don't know. I would be curious to know over the next 5 years.
More longer to stick in terms of have success long-term, or you're saying not leave?
Success long-term and not leave by happenstance is, I guess, what I'm saying. Like Jeff Brom could be at Louisville forever because I think he's just a high-floor offensive mind. And I think Rhett Lashley at SMU, high-floor offensive mind. You think Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, high-floor offensive mind. I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at with it.
I think fans just kind of trust the offensive-minded coach more because it's like it's easier to see good offense than like understand like why the defense is not as good. You know what I mean? It's just offense is like it to lose games 10-7 is so much worse than losing games 42-40. It's like it feels completely different as a fan. You had something to cheer about throughout the game. Your team was making big plays. They were giving up other big plays on the other side. It's like if you have to be bad at one, it feels a lot more satisfying from a fan perspective to be bad at defense but good at offense. Because if you're just having these, just 2 yards in a cloud of dust type of games and 10-9, it's like, yeah, I mean, you could win more games doing that, and I feel like it's kind of more impressive to do that. Because it feels so much more difficult to have an elite defense. It seems like there's a lot of teams that can just kind of have a gimmicky offense or something and find ways to put up points. So I feel like that's why I kind of value the defensive minded coaches, like the ones that have proven to be good. I kind of value them more than the offensive minded coaches because it just feels like there's so many more of them. Or I should say there's so fewer defensive minded guys that are kind of the elite of the elite. That, like you said, Lanning and Kirby, kind of Saban, obviously.
That's fair. Toughest schedule in 2025 in the Big Ten, Matt Green. We talked SEC last week for this question. Who do you have for the Big Ten here in 2025?
I think it really comes down to two teams. Like Wisconsin is the first one I look at, simply because like the game out of conference at Alabama, like that's one of the toughest non-conference games in the entire conference. But Ohio State's playing Texas. That's another one of the big one. Michigan's got Oklahoma. But they have Alabama on the road. They get Oregon on the road. They get Michigan on the road. They have to play Ohio State and Illinois both at home. Also Indiana on the road. It feels like, I don't know, but if I was to look at like the preseason, they play 9 games in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to look at the preseason top 9, whatever the media poll comes out, it feels like Wisconsin's schedule would be the top 9 teams. Or I guess Penn State's missing from that list. Other than Penn State, it's basically all of the consistent programs that have been good in the Big Ten. And then, you throw in Alabama out of conference. Wisconsin is the first one that jumps out at me.
Wisconsin's my pick for a lot of the reasons you just laid out. I mean, Alabama, getting them at Alabama this year is just brutal. I also think there's 2 reasons it's Wisconsin and why Luke Fickell, man, I think he just got an extension this offseason, which was weird, if I remember correctly. And it's like, what have we seen to this point? I mean, he was the crown jewel for a while. I mean, he gets Cincinnati where it is, and it just felt like
year 1 or year 2. This was year 2. This
was year 2.
Year 1, right?
This was year 2.
He's been there 2 years now. Okay, yeah.
This will be year 3.
Anything yet?
Yeah. But they've struck out. He did the weird thing where he hired Phil Longo, an air raid guy, to run that at Wisconsin, which is just, you can't do it. Like, somebody should have been like in his ear. Like, we understand we were tired of the Paul Chris stuff where it's like, the offense was just too bad. There was a point where it's like, we've got to have better than this. But that doesn't mean we go air raid. That doesn't mean we completely overhaul things to pretend something we're not. And what you're not is an air raid school. There's just something wrong about it, Matt Green. It feels like a felony for Wisconsin or Iowa or Minnesota to ever lean into an air raid type attack. Just not that kind of football. Nobody wants to see it. It's gross. It's not what we grew up on. We don't want it, Matt. I don't want it. It's like whole milk in your 30s. Hard pass.
Yeah, you got
get that away from me.
You got to play to your strengths. This is low key running back you up there in Wisconsin. Like, run the ball.
We love that. Like, that's how you became a national name. Like, yeah, Russell Wilson was cool for a little bit, but no, bring back Brooks Bollinger. Let's get Jim Sorgi in there.
Russell Wilson was definitely the best season they ever had. So that's why they know they need to do something to attract a quarterback to actually get better than what they were under like Bielema and oh man, why am I blanking on the dude before Bielema? Alvarez.
Anderson? Gary Anderson?
Oh no, I was saying Barry Alvarez.
Barry Alvarez. But that was a gap, right? Wasn't Gary Anderson there for a little bit?
Yeah, you're not even to that 9-10 win type of level where you need to get better than that. Like, just try to get back to where you were, and now you'd get back to college football playoffs if Wisconsin could just get back to being the perennial top kind of 10 to 12 program that they kind of always were. Like, you don't need to be extreme and like do something crazy different. Just try to go back to what Wisconsin's bread and butter was.
Gary Anderson, by the way, who was really bad at Oregon State and really bad at Utah State, he went 19-7 in 2013 and 14 at Wisconsin, 13-3 in the Big Ten. He was only there 2 years before he left for the Oregon State job. But yeah, Wisconsin, like Luke Fickell now. He
left Wisconsin for the Oregon State job?
Yes.
Just chose Oregon State over Wisconsin.
He's a Utah guy. He played center at Utah back in the day.
Bold strategy, Cotton.
It didn't pay off because Oregon State was really bad. But Luke Fickell now at Wisconsin, where I don't. Oh, by the way, he's been there 3 years. We met. No. He coached. That's the weird part. Yeah, this will be year 3. Like we
coached
said.
The bowl game.
He coached the bowl game. That was the weird part. I forgot. He coached the bowl game right after he got the job. So that was strange. He's 13-13, 8-10 in the Big Ten, Matt Green. Like, I think this is a huge year for Luke Fickell, but you also extended him, so I guess you're just riding this thing. You bring in Grimes, who's going to bring back the ground and pound stuff. He did that at Baylor and BYU. He was Zach Wilson's offensive coordinator years ago on that great team. So we'll see what they look like. That should help. Billy Edwards Jr. is going to be your quarterback coming in from Maryland, the latest transfer attempt, because they brought in Tanner Mordecai, and that didn't work. And who did they bring in the first year that also didn't work? They've gone to
Mordecai was the first one, and then
who was last year?
It was dude from Miami.
That's right, Tyler Van Dyke. That's right,
Van Dyke. Yeah.
So it hasn't gone well, but it's like third time's the charm, maybe with Billy Edwards from Maryland. We'll see. He was all right for the Terps.
Mordecai put up huge numbers at SMU, right?
I think that's right.
I want to say so. Yeah, I'm pretty surprised. I was pretty high on Luke Fickell when he got the Wisconsin job. So I'm pretty surprised at how bad it's been through the first 2 years.
But you have a terrible schedule. Like they're kind of in a Florida schedule mode. Is Wisconsin the Florida of the Big Ten?
That's so true. Yeah, I mean, this team goes 7-5. It's probably an achievement for sure.
And it's like Wisconsin's fallen, man. Like this is not good. Like it has not gone well, and I don't think it's going to go well this year for Fickell and the Badgers either. So I don't know what that looks like going into.
There's one other candidate though for the toughest schedule in the Big Ten, because it's the only team that plays Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State, and that's Rutgers. I think Rutgers was the team that had the easiest schedule, weren't they? Like a year ago, I want to say. Like people were picking them like a low key playoff dark horse because their schedule is kind of easy. They get Ohio State at home. No, what is it? Why does the home games? Penn State is a home game. Oregon's a home game, but they go at Washington, at Illinois, at Ohio State. It's gonna be tough. Don't have anything tough out of conference, but the only team in the conference that plays all three, the big three, basically from the Big Ten. So that's pretty huge. I think Illinois is gonna be this year's Indiana, that might be a playoff contender because of avoiding all the good teams. They get Ohio State at home, and that's basically it. USC, I guess, if they're better. They do go at Indiana. So at Indiana with Illinois at Indiana week 4. That might be for a playoff bid. Who knows?
I also think Illinois is just really good. Brett Bielema's got that thing. Having Altmaier back for another year. They return a bunch of starters.
A lot of returning starters, right?
Yeah, so I think they're going to be good either way, or not. But yeah, Illinois is a good Indiana replacement for the Big Ten, the CFP. I think they have a good shot. But yeah, I think Wisconsin. I would say the other dark horse here, Matt Green, is Northwestern, because Braun needs a good year. They have a new AD now, I believe. So the guy who hired him is not the guy who is currently the AD at Northwestern. They had that weird year 1 blip that it kind of went pretty well for him out of nowhere, but their schedule is not great. They play 6 teams that won at least 8 games last year. They got Illinois, Michigan, Penn State, Tulane, Oregon, Minnesota. I don't know. I think this is a losing record for him again this year.
At Tulane too, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go well for Northwestern. So I think they needed some schedule luck to keep that staff, is my gut. And so I don't think that's going to happen. I think Northwestern's probably heading towards a coaching change after next year, is my guess.
Yeah, I could see that. But how about Ohio State, Texas, week 1 of the season? That's just in Columbus. That's gonna be massive.
I mean, Michigan goes to Oklahoma early. That's gonna be weird.
Yeah, that's I think that week 2. Yeah, that's week 2. That's love to see it. Love to see the big time non-conference games for sure. And
final thing here,
USC playing Georgia Southern week 2. You know, all the big
in
time
Statesboro, right?
No, I don't think so, right?
No, that'd be amazing though. Like, I would love to get the Trojans and Lincoln Riley in Statesboro, Georgia. That'd be a fun weekend in Statesboro.
No, I don't think so.
Why not? Who had a weird one where they were like, why were you going there? Who was that? Alabama in basketball played on the road at was it North Dakota? They played North Dakota State maybe, but they were on the road there. It's like, why are you going to India? Like, why are you traveling there for these games?
Mississippi State's played a bunch of road game football wise.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of weird road games. They played at UMass or something one year. They've played a couple at Memphis, I want to say.
But it might make sense. Hey, turn into a recruiting weekend. If you're USC, you're trying to get those Georgia kids to stop flipping to the dogs late. Maybe you need to have a game in Georgia for some kids to come attend.
Go play in Statesboro. I don't know. What's bold strategy?
Battle for South Georgia. Battle
Whatever
for South Georgia right now.
Yeah, they have the guy from Gainesville right now, the linebacker committed, who's big time. So we'll see. We'll see if that sticks this time.
We shall see. Final thing here, Matt Green. Bruce Feldman, a longtime great college football reporter. He hosts a good podcast with Stuart Mandel, The Audible, and reporter Fox Sports and The Athletic for a long time, and just a really good reporter. I love reading his stuff. And he came out with his top 25 coaching rankings, Matt Green, this past week. So I wanted to ask you, we're going to do our own next week on next week's show, and where we're at this year versus last year. But when you look at his rankings, what is your one thing that is most glaring to you that you just disagree with, where Bruce put this person?
The one thing I mean, I get putting Dabo at 3 if you're just like the guys that have won championships are here at the top. I don't think he's the 3rd best coach in college football right now. But I think it's pretty bold to put Deion Sanders at 18. Like, this is a huge year for Deion. Like, he's never coached when Shador was not his quarterback or when Travis Hunter was not on his team. Like, essentially the best player in college football. This is a massive year. I have no idea what to expect from Colorado. They're assembling the greatest playing coaching staff of all time. Warren Sapp, Deion, Marshall Faulk, like my childhood, just coming back in coaching form. But I don't think I can put Deion like top 20 over some of these guys. Like Mario Cristobal is a guy that I think is fairly ranked down at 20. Like, I have a lot of criticisms, but he's a good coach. But I think there's no reason. There's like almost zero explanation for why Miami was not in the playoff last year. Like, that was a huge failure, honestly. So I agree with a guy like Cristobal being like a little bit lower. But I mean, Cristobal has proven way more than a guy like Deion has. Like, I mean, 2 years as a head coach in D1, and last year, what did they win? 9 games? Like, that's That's the best season is 9 wins, 4 wins to 9 wins. Like that's big time year 1 to year 2. But I'm not ready to put Dion over some of these guys that have like proven, like a Brett Bielema or something. Have just proven to be a really good coach. Like it's not like a huge omission to have Brett Bielema down at 24. That's like a decent ranking. But just to see Dion ahead of some of these guys that are a little more proven, that was one of the more surprising things to me.
I agree with Dabo. He can't be 3 anymore. Like, it's just been a long time. Like, he's slow to adapt. They have not realistically contended in a long time now since Trevor Lawrence has been gone. I don't know. We'll see. This is a big year for Dabo and where he ultimately ranks, but I don't think he has kept that program to the point where it's like it's wild because he and Nick Saban were 1-2 for years and he was right there. I mean, even just going back to Urban and stuff. I mean, Dabo has been one of the 3 best coaches, I think, this century in the sport. I would say that, but I just think right now, I don't think if you're taking your top 3 coaches in the sport, I don't think Dabo fits your top 3.
Yeah, if you went to preseason 2019 polls, you would have people that had Saban and Dabo tied for number 1.
Yes.
Like he was
that was a real debate for a while. And it was assumed that like, oh, maybe Dabo replaces Saban. Like he had the second best coach in the sport replacing. I mean, obviously as an Alabama guy, like that just felt like, oh, that makes so much sense. And didn't happen that way. I think Matt Campbell at 9's too high. I think that's just still pretty crazy. I think he's a really good coach, but I think having him over guys like, I mean, even Brian Kelly, where it's like Brian Kelly has done a lot more than Matt Campbell has done to this point. I mean, even Lincoln Riley, even with what you think about him to this point, like the last couple of years at USC, the guy was a machine at Oklahoma. And we'll see if he ultimately can get USC to where he got Oklahoma.
Oh,
Lance Leipold is too high too.
I was a little surprised Lincoln Riley at 13. I thought he might go a little lower.
I think he should at this point. Like, how do you make the case that you would take Lincoln Riley over Heupel right now? What's the case for Lincoln over Heupel?
No, I don't think I would make. The case is what he's done with Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, but it's like the Oklahoma years are kind of over at this point. I mean, I guess USC still had a Heisman quarterback with Caleb Williams, but I would agree with that. I think Brian Kelly. I know I haven't made my list, but I know I would have him higher than 10. But yeah, I was actually gonna ask you: is Heupel at 16? Is that disrespectful?
I think Heupel 16's. I would probably say he's in the top 15. I would have him over Leipold. I'd have him over Lincoln at this point. I would have him over Whittingham. I'd have him over Campbell. But then I think it gets
Sports Center commercial years ago. I'm in the top 10, Roger.
He's somewhere around that. I think he's somewhere around top 10 to 15. I would say somewhere in between 10 and 15.
To hear you not say he's a clear top 10 guy.
People say he's like a top 10 guy. And I'm like, okay, well, let's write them all down and then tell me who he is, like you're taking ahead of him. Because right now, I'll just do this and we'll see if he ultimately falls in my top 10. So keep track for me. You ready?
Got it.
Kirby, Ryan Day, Sark.
You giving away your list right now? We're doing this next week.
Oh, I was just saying. Oh, that's right. I was going to give you the 10. See if I could name 10 that would take over
tease
Heupel.
A little bit. Let the people tune in next week.
That's a good tease. I stopped there. The last thing I'll say.
I will say that was your top 4. I have a guy that's not.
That wasn't my top 4. I was just like looking at this list that Bruce
that
Bruce had, and I was just saying which ones of those I would take over Heupel at this point. I would say the last thing I thought was egregious here, though, and he's still not getting respect. Lane Kiffin at 20 behind like Cignetti. It's like, all right, Cignetti had a good first year at Indiana. He was good at James Madison, but like Kiffin I think people are now taking for granted what Kiffin has built and how effing hard it is to do what Kiffin is doing year over year in the portal. Like Norvell, look at those lists. He had Norvell in the top 10 last year. He's out of the top 10. He's out of the entire top 25 after what he just did at Florida State. Lane Kiffin is still winning. Lane Kiffin, they didn't make the CFP this past year, and it was a good opportunity for them. But he's winning double-digit games at Ole Miss. Like, this is not a prestigious program that wins consecutively year over year. Lane Kiffin is absolutely a top 15-ish coach. Like, top 20th, like, some of the names in front of Lane Kiffin is insane to me. Like, Lane Kiffin is... I don't know what else he has to do. I guess because it's they're like, oh, he should have made the CFP last year. I'm like, it's Ole Miss. Like, he had a really good year. Yeah, the Kentucky game at home was bad. He blew out Kirby Smart in Georgia. Like, he kicked their ass. And we haven't seen that from anybody else in this conference, really, that did what Lane Kiffin did to Kirby. So I think to pretend that Lane Kiffin is not in the top 15 to top 10 coaches right now is silly to me, because I think that job is really hard. I think there's a reason that most people don't win at Ole Miss. And he's coming off a year where he did something that no one has been able to do, which is like really beat down a Kirby Smart coach Georgia team and made it look easy. Like, I don't, is that fair? I just think I think Lane still does not get nearly enough respect that he deserves.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. When I was looking at my list, I think he would be close to top 10. I don't know exactly if he cracks the top 10, but yeah, it feels like there's like certain red flags Lane Kiffin has of why he's not one of the elite coaches, I think. But it's like putting him at 20, just that's nowhere close to right. Like, I think there's the way they recruit, I'm really skeptical about how they're building that, how sustainable that is moving forward. But like, he wanted FAU. He won it. Obviously, USC, that didn't go well, but the guy's come a long way since then. Ole Miss has not had this level of consistency like since Archie Manning was there, basically. So I'm with you there. I think Lane Kiffin is definitely underrated on this list.
It's wild. He's still only 49. He's 44-18 at Ole Miss. 44-18 at Ole Miss, Matt Green. Like, it's just, I think we're really taking for granted what he is. I mean, he's won 10 games at least in 3 of the last 4 years. He's won 21 games his last 2 years. I mean, it's Ole Miss, folks. It's Ole Miss. And he is making it look a whole lot easier to win a lot at Ole Miss than it actually is.
I do think he's penalized, I think, a lot for 2024, because I think 2024 was the year that Ole Miss was supposed to finish top 5, top 10. And you look at that team, what their best was in 2024, and they looked like, I wouldn't have been surprised if they went on an Ohio State type of run. Like, they looked like one of the more talented teams if they would have gotten in the playoff. So the fact that team lost to Florida, lost to Kentucky, obviously the LSU, I don't think led for 1 second of the game. They didn't lead until they took the lead in overtime to win. So, those kind of things happen in Death Valley. But LSU also wasn't a good team last year. So he lost to 3 teams that finished unranked. Like, a year you didn't have to play Alabama, you beat Georgia. I think he kind of gets penalized for, it felt like 2024 was the year, and it was just another good season, which, like to your original point, he's kind of recalibrated expectations that winning 9 or 10 games at Ole Miss is kind of being taken for granted now.
I think we're on the same page. Well, that's all I've got, Matt Green. Anything else you want to throw out here before we wrap up here on a Sunday night?
That's all I got, man. Excited for some March Madness this week. It's should be the best week of the year, I think. And from a sports fan perspective, that those Thursday and Fridays, the first days of the tournament are always a lot of fun, and it'll be fun, a little extra with Georgia getting to join the party for the first time since 2015.
Absolutely. We'll see. It's a battle of the dogs. Gonzaga Bulldogs and the Georgia Bulldogs, and Tennessee against Wofford. Why am I blanking out? Was Wofford the Terriers? I want to say
Wofford Terriers, I believe. Yeah. Where is that? South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they might have a decent showing there up in Lexington.
Matt Green, always a pleasure. I'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.